Welcome back to the MM Sports Pod. We are talking some college football today. The final rankings just came out, so we get to get a look at the first 12 team bracket. I'm here with Max today. Max, how are we doing, my man?
Doing good, man. Yes, it was good. Some good championship games here that we'll break down, and it's nice to finally know what the college football playoff looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll get into the championship games first, and then we'll look at the bracket and kind of our takeaways from it. So first, how we got there. First game Friday night, UNLV versus Boise State. Boise goes up 21 nothing. They end up winning that game 21-7. Ashton Jeanty goes nuclear again. What'd you see from that game, Matt?
Yeah, not it's. I mean, it's pretty simple. Boise State just kind of dominated the first half. Bo Aston Genty popped off for a few runs there. They get up 21 nothing. Second half, they just played keep away from UNLV, and UNLV they really couldn't convert. Like they for example, they get down first and goal, and then they go four straight plays with the turnover on downs in the third quarter, right? So they really didn't score until the fourth to make it 21-7 and never really mounted a comeback. So it was a pretty simple, dominant win for Boise State. Overall, as far as playoff implications go, they obviously, earned a bye, which is phenomenal for a group of five team. That's impressive. And I think they just kind of go as far as Genty in the run game can take them. If they get a matchup where they can, get some push up front with the O line and let Genty, do what he does, then I think they have a chance because they're solid on both sides of the ball, but they're not necessarily elite. So I'm not sure, what their odds are at winning a playoff game. We'll see, but hey, they absolutely earned a spot getting that bye.
Yeah, and I think the play of the game is with about 45 seconds left in the second quarter. Jeanty just houses one from 75 yards out, and that makes it 21 nothing. And considering the way that the Boise State plays and the ability for them to shoot block and just play good defense, that puts you in a really tough spot being down 21 nothing. So yeah, exactly. Ashton Jeanty, man, give this man the Heisman. I'm on the wave. Give him the Heisman. I saw something. It said if you put Travis Hunter on Boise State, they're unranked and not in the playoffs. And if you put Ashton Jeanty on Colorado, Colorado's a playoff team. How do you feel about that take?
That's interesting, man. Yeah, I don't hate the take. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of in the camp where either way, I'm happy. I think Jetty is 100% deserving of the Heisman. He's had one of the best running back seasons that I've ever seen personally, probably since Derrick Henry. It's been an even better season than that. So, um, if you're using that standpoint, of like team success, I think you do give it to Genty. If you're doing what the typical Heisman standard is, which is just who puts up more stats, um, I think it might lean towards Travis Hunter, but we shall see. I'm honestly happy with either guy. I kind of hope for Genty just because it's fun to see a group of five running back as dominant as he is get a Heisman, but we'll see.
Yeah, the reason I want to give it to Jeanty is I think the storyline is a little bit better. I think his contribution to winning has probably been greater, in my opinion, in terms of winning it at the getting to the college football playoff. And the thing is when you see Heisman's go out to teams that aren't going to the playoff or didn't win a conference championship or something, it's when there's no other clear candidate. So last year you're looking at Jaden Daniels, and everyone knew going in, it was like if Oregon beats Washington, Bo Nix is going to win the Heisman. But they lost, and so they're not in the playoff. And so, okay, Jaden Daniels' stats are absolutely nuts. We're going to give it to Jaden Daniels. So you think back to when Lamar won at Louisville was 10-2 or 10-3. They didn't win the conference championship. I don't even think they played in it that year. And Lamar's stats were just so otherworldly that, and there was no real other clear candidate that year that they give it to Lamar. So now you look at it and it's like, okay, Travis Hunter is doing some crazy stuff. Now, granted, this is unlike anything we've seen before, so fair. But Travis Hunter obviously doing some crazy stuff, but so is Genty. Genty's putting up a historic season as well, and there's a level of team success there that I think contributes to that. So I personally want to see Genty win it, but like I said, man, and like you said as well, Travis Hunter's doing stuff that we've never really seen before. So if you want to give it to him, like I'm not going to be upset. I get it 100%.
Yeah, the only take I am fading is like oh, I guess the Heisman just goes to whoever has more snaps now. Like, we don't need to go that far. Like, Travis Hunter's been doing stupid things, man. He's a top 10, top like 5 corner in the country and a top 10 receiver in the country. That's something we haven't seen before. So, um, I'm not quite sure why there's so much anger towards Travis Hunter being in the Heisman conversation. Um, I guess there's just a lot of Ashton Jetty fans out there, which is sick. But yeah, I don't think we need to be outraged if Travis Hunter wins the Heisman.
Yeah, I think it's probably just the Colorado hater base. Like that's got to be what it is. Which I was fading them earlier this season, but at some point, like they were good enough to where you just kind of got to get over it. But Travis Hunter, like as a player, if you remove him from the whole Dion hype train, whether or not you like it or not, he's had a phenomenal season, and I think
Hmm.
that should be recognized.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So moving on, we had Army versus Tulane. Now this game ended up not mattering very much, but we should talk about it. Army, it's what we said at the beginning. It's really, is Army able to establish the ground game and control the ball, and can they get some stops on defense? And they did. And that's obviously the key to the game whenever Army plays, and particularly in this game, they bullied them the entire game. So quarterback has 2 passes for 17 yards, and they put up, I think it was 38. So, man, interesting to watch Army always, man. What'd you see in this one?
Triple option, man. It was in full force this game. Daly, he crushed it, man. 126 yards, 5 yards per carry, and 4 touchdowns. As the quarterback, so you know, uh, they crushed it. I mean, the guy he was handing it off to is one option. Udo, he had 20 carries, 158 yards for a touchdown,
Oh,
averaging almost 8 yards a carry. Yeah, so the triple option was just running at a high level here. They just bullied them, and they played great defense. Tulane really couldn't get much going. It was pretty much the same half, first and second half. Army just was able to put up a few touchdown drives while Tulane just came up short multiple times. So, overall, impressive season from Army, man. Going 11-1, you're one loss away really from being in the playoffs. They lost to Notre Dame there. They win that game. They maybe even have a bye in the playoffs. I don't know, but overall, super impressive season, and triple option still fun to watch. Still relevant in college football.
yeah, they got that game with Navy too coming up this week, which we won't really get into that much. It's not that important, but I'm curious. Not that it matters, but just pure speculation. If Army were to have won that game, and then like, does the committee put them in, and then what happens if they lose to Navy? Like, do they bump them back out? I don't really know how that would have
Oh,
worked,
that's
but I
true.
was
Yeah,
just,
because there's one more game.
yeah, because Army still plays Navy. So what if they get put into the playoff and then they lose?
It's a good
So do
question.
they reseed it? Like I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's
I
just
don't
a
know.
bonus game, exhibition match.
Yeah, exhibition game. Let's go. Throw Air Force in there. Make it a 3-way game. Make it fun.
I'll have to see what the unis are though. They do a new uniform every year for Army Navy, usually like to pay homage to a certain squad of some type. They're usually pretty sick. So
Yeah, that is
I'll
cool.
look forward to tapping into what the UDs are for that game.
Yeah, you're never gonna be upset with an extra football game on a Saturday.
No, sir.
All right, Iowa State versus Arizona State. I mean, holy smokes!
Whew.
Arizona State came in the hot team and they leave even hotter. I mean, absolutely scorched them. Cam Scatterbo, man, 16 carries, 170 yards, 11 yards per carry almost, 2 touchdowns. Hit the Heisman pose. Maybe it was 3 touchdowns. I think he had a receiving touchdown because he hit the Heisman pose 3 times. And I don't know if you saw the interview after the game, but they're like, why do you finally decide to break out the Heisman pose? He's like, I need recognition. I'm the best running back in the country, which this year is a hard claim to make. Ashton Jeanty is that guy. But, I mean, Cam Scatterbo, man, hell of a game. Arizona State just playing ridiculous right now. What'd you see out of that one?
Yeah, Iowa State, they came out and it's like, oh, this is going to be, kind of the classic Big 12 shootout. They were able to keep pace early. And then Arizona State just decided, no, we're not going to play that game. We're going to blow this game out of the water. And they did. Scatterbo, he's a bowling ball, man. Iowa State could not tackle that dude at all. I don't know how many broken tackles he had, but I probably witnessed 10 at least. It was ridiculous. So overall, Arizona State, the turnaround is just insane. They had one of the worst seasons, probably in their college history, one of the worst seasons in college football last year, and they are now Big 12 champions with a bye in the playoffs. That's unbelievable. So props to that coach for turning this program around. And I'm interested, man. The offense is balanced. They got a very good run game, and their quarterback, he can dish it. And the defense, while it's not anything elite by any means, I think they could maybe hang. So I'm curious. I'm just curious to see heading into the playoffs if they can hang with the big dogs. We'll see. But they've absolutely earned their right into the playoffs.
Yeah, they're an opportunistic defense. They force a lot of turnovers. There was a point in the game, I mean, it's really where there was no chance of coming back. Iowa State turns the ball over on 3 consecutive drives. It's like interception, fumble, fumble. And Arizona State just turns around, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. Like quick 21-0 run. My gosh. And Arizona State, they did this without their leading wide receiver, who's had over 1,000 yards on the season. So if he can come back, I'm not sure the injury status on that, but if he can come back for that game, which would be, New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, I mean, offense gets even more potent than a team that just put 45 up on a ranked Iowa State team, whose defense is nothing to scoff at. Like, it's not like they have a bad defense or anything. So being able to do that is pretty impressive.
Yeah, yeah. Big 12, it's pretty tough to judge this season. You just got a lot of teams that were kind of beating each other up. And this was our result. We got Iowa State, Arizona State when there were, I think, a couple like Colorado, BYU had the same record, just lost the tiebreaker to make it to the championship. But um, it's really hard to figure out where the Big 12 is at in the scope of how they're going to fit into the playoffs. Their resumes are just, hey, we all beat each other, and so yeah, we'll see. But I'm interested. Arizona State, they've definitely showed something. They're hot right now.
Yeah, 100%. They got a chance, man. They got a puncher's chance. They just eye test wise, they look like a really quality football team. They've only lost one game with their starting quarterback. Their game that they lost, Cincinnati didn't have him. So, buy into that as much as you want to. Georgia versus Texas, man. This is a game that I was probably the most excited to watch going into the weekend. Just kind of see, does Texas come back? And I said going into that game, I said, look, Quinn Ewers, I don't think he's going to have the same kind of day that he did last time. I think he's going to play better, and I think Texas is going to win that game. Well, I was wrong. I was absolutely wrong. He throws 27 for 46, so a lot of passing attempts there. That kind of nullifies the fact that he threw for 358 when you throw that many times. 1 touchdown, 2 picks. I mean, it's just a continuing trend. This means Texas, by the way, 0-2 against ranked teams. Georgia's the only ranked team they played all season. So, they looked better in the first half. They outgained them by a lot. End up only going in up 6-3, and but that's just how it wrapped up. Carson Beck gets hurt. Georgia comes back with a backup QB, ends up winning that game. What'd you see out of this one?
My take last week was that Texas is the better football team, but Georgia is going to find a way to win. And I think that really showed in this game. I think Texas is going to look back at this game and be like, how did we not win this? They moved the ball up and down the field against Georgia, especially in the first half, and you only come away with 6 points. You can't do that. You got to be able to convert in the red zone. While Georgia, I said Texas is better. It's not like Georgia's not good enough to win that game, right? So you got to be able to convert in the red zone, and it's just another Ewers game where he disappoints. He throws a pick early that wasn't too good. Throws a pick late where they're lucky they were even able to make it to overtime. That he throws a pick after Georgia goes up 16-13, basically within the Texas 30, right? Fortunately for them, Stockman throws a terrible pick, so they're able to get back
that was
into
a bad one too. That was
a bad
really
one,
bad.
right? And so fortunately for them, but I mean the defense played lights out football, man. You held Georgia to 16 points in regulation, right? I mean, when you look at the talent you have on offense, you need to win that game. So overall, you got to be disappointed. Just the defense, they forced multiple turnovers, and honestly, got a little bit unlucky. They forced 4 fumbles in that game and only recovered 1. And so that's a big swing right there. Quite a few lucky bounces for Georgia that allow them to win that game. But overall, this was just defense, defense, defense. That both of them were balling out. Georgia 6 sacks, 15 tackles for a loss, fumble recovery, and 2 picks. That's a solid day on defense, right? So we still got to give props to Georgia for wreaking havoc on Texas's offensive line. And to give Texas, a little bit of benefit of the doubt there, they were missing their starting offensive tackle, who's probably going to be, first rounder heading into the draft. So that was a big loss there. But still, you still got a ton of talent. You move the ball up and down the field. Go get some points, man. So yeah, the defense is elite. I just don't believe in Ewers, and that's as simple as that. I think they're going to have a good playoff run, but I think as soon as they run into a team that is either equally matched or maybe even better, like Georgia, I don't think Ewers can find a way to get that win.
Yeah, well, luckily for Texas, the way the bracket ends up working out, they wouldn't have to play Georgia until the Natty, so that's probably good for them. But yeah, they outgained Georgia by about 200 yards in the first half, which is just insane to only be up 3 points after doing that. I think they held Georgia to 57 offensive yards in the first half, which is
it was dominant,
just absolutely dominant. And you look at it, and man, you're gonna let Georgia come out with a backup quarterback and outperform you in the second half. Like Quinn Ewers, we gotta be better than that. And I think you pinpoint that exactly. Like that's where that game lies, is in the hand of Quinn Ewers. And he was not able to get it done. I mean, then you get the opportunity, you somehow get lucky enough to get to overtime, and it's you versus a backup quarterback, and you get the ball to 25. There's less opportunity for variance in terms of like, tip balls and stuff, because we're at the 25, so you're almost there. You got to go execute a red zone drive versus a guy who hasn't played a snap of football against a non-FCS program this season, and you can't win that battle. Now, hats off to Georgia's defense; they played phenomenal, but that's kind of the big takeaway there. One other thing is Georgia; they fumbled the ball 21 times this season and only lost it 4 times.
That's insane.
That is absolutely nuts. They've had struggles, especially from their wide receivers, but they've had struggles with drops. They've had struggles with fumbling the ball, and they've been fortunate enough to be able to fall on it over 80% of the time, which is ridiculous. Now, hats off to them for playing to the whistle, man, and making sure they're getting on the ball. But if we see any type of change in that, they could be in trouble in terms of turning the ball over with those fumbles going into the playoff.
Yeah, I almost feel worse about Georgia heading into the playoffs, just because one, we don't know what the Carson Beck situation is as far as his injury goes. While, they kind of looked better with Stockton, the quarterback there for the second half. Still, you may be relying on your backup QB. And on top, they just got no playmakers on the outside, man. They drop a gazillion passes and they don't get any separation. And so they kind of just have this offense that can every once in a while put together a field goal drive, and they rely on the defense to generate some turnovers in favorable territory so that maybe they can punch it in the end zone. It's just not an offense that's scaring anyone right now. And so I think, going forward, you really just need to rely on the defense to win you this championship. So in some ways, I'm almost more concerned about Georgia because with Texas, we saw offense, right? We saw a fair amount of it. They just couldn't convert in the red zone. And defense, we know we saw that. They were dominant on defense. So in some ways, I almost feel better about Texas after this game, even though they lost. Georgia, they're just finding a way to win, which is impressive. I'm just curious to see if they're going to be able to do that now for 3 consecutive games against one of the top, 3 of the top 12 teams in the country.
Yeah, I mean, that I kind of agree with you. Like Texas, I feel pretty comfortable knowing what I'm going to get out of them. I get their 0-2 against ranked teams, and that's kind of one of the things that I hang my hat on in terms of my argument against them. But also, both times they played Georgia, who is undoubtedly a top 5 team in the country. They've been right there with them. Even the game where they got, the score is not really indicative, I don't think, of that game. Georgia had a bunch of short fields in that first game, and they had a chance to go tie it late in the third. So, yeah, it's a 15-point game, but, we know they can hang with the best teams in the country just based on how they played. But, they don't look like the best team in the country that a lot of people had them, coming in as. So I think that can be kind of said about any one of these contenders. There's definitely flaws, and we'll get into that, a little bit coming up here. We got Clemson versus SMU, ACC title game. This one was kind of, you didn't know if it was a win-and-in game. It ended up not being. But we knew Clemson had to win this game. Clemson, Dabo Swinney said it. He's like, the door was open for us, and we got to take advantage. And they did. They ended up winning that game. They went up 14-0. I think this was maybe the best I've ever seen Cade Klubnik look in his entire college career. I was watching. I mean, he was hitting his routes. He kind of faded late, but especially early in the game, man, he was on time. He was on target. It was pinpoint stuff from him. The ending of this game was absolutely crazy. So SMU ties it up with a crazy toe drag catch to make it 31-31 with 14 seconds left. Clemson returns a kickoff to about the 40. They hit one little 15-yarder. Kicker buries it from 56, and it clears the crossbar by just a couple of feet for them to end up walking it off. I mean, heartbreak for SMU, especially because at that point they don't know if they're in the playoffs or not. But it was a hell of a game. It was a great game to watch. What did you get out of this one?
Yeah. I think SMU, if that game is one more quarter long, or if they go to OT, I think they end up winning that game. It was just you can't start like they did. They fumble in their first possession. Clemson capitalizes on it. They go 3-and-out on their second possession. Clemson capitalizes. You start out 14-0, right? Which is just not a way you want to start a game with a team that you're pretty evenly matched with. And so props to them for being resilient and finding a way back into the game. You hate to see a special teams fumble there to let up that big of a kick return with whatever it was, 16 seconds on the clock or something like that. To tie it up with that little time and still lose the game, that's unfortunate. But overall, it was a good quarterback battle, man. Klubnik, like you said, he balled out, 262 yards, 4 touchdowns. The SMU quarterback did a phenomenal job, 304 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. It was a solid game overall. It was just great comeback from SMU. You got to be able to find a way to prevent them from scoring and for 16 seconds. But it's the ACC. I'm having a hard time figuring out where these teams lie in the scope of the playoffs here. They're 12-11, right? They're the very back end of the playoff rankings.
They're the last two in.
And I think for good reason. The ACC has been probably the least impressive conference out of the Power Four conferences. They've absolutely, both I think earned their right into the playoffs, especially Clemson winning the ACC and SMU doing, just having a solid season overall. But SMU definitely lost more there, man. I mean, you lose a first round bye, and now you have to go to Penn State in the first round of the playoffs. So that's a major loss for SMU. With kind of Clemson finds a way to weasel their way into the playoffs somehow. They made it. So I'm not too high on either of these teams heading in, but they both, deserve a right to have a shot.
Yeah, I mean, you always want to see how the game plays out. You never know. Like you said, SMU loses that first round bye. That's rough. If you've watched SMU much this year, you know that is not their best game that they've played this season in a game that really called for it. So are they going to be able to take that and turn that around and really give their best effort? Going to Penn State, going to Happy Valley. I'm sure it'll be a whiteout game. There's no way they don't do it justice over there. But, man, yeah, they lost that. Interestingly enough, they end up in the same part of the bracket, so they would have been the 3 seed had they won that game. They still kind of end in the same, that same little quartile. So instead of playing the winner of, probably Penn State and Alabama, they just have to go to Penn State, and then they go play the 3 seed at a neutral site. But, yeah, by losing that game, by giving up that field goal in the last 16 seconds, you earned yourself a date in Happy Valley, and best of luck to you because Penn State looked pretty good, all things considered, this weekend. And that'll bring us to that Big Ten championship game, Oregon versus Penn State. Man, this game nukes, dude, everywhere. So
Hmm.
many points. Not at all what I expected out of this game. But Penn State starts out down 28-10, and then they storm back and they get the ball down 8 after. Well, they score to make it a one possession game on a 4th down and 10 with one of the craziest throws I've ever seen in terms of just bodily strength. Drew Aller is getting dragged down by, I believe it was Caldwell on Oregon, who's like a 320-pound defensive tackle, and he's hanging on the back of his shirt. And he throws an absolute seed, 20 yards right into the chest of his wide receiver for a touchdown. They end up going for 2, not getting it. But, then they're right there. They end up getting a stop, get the ball back. I've got issues with the way they handled that last drive, but they do end up throwing an interception, and it was a really well played interception. Corner basically boxes out the wide receiver and kind of lets it drop into his breadbasket, and that steals the game. Oregon gets to kneel out the clock. But concerns on defense for both sides. High upside for the offense on both sides. What are you seeing in this one?
Yeah, this was not what I was expecting at all. I expected a much lower scoring game, and yeah, just points everywhere. No one can stop anything. Um, I still feel fantastic about Oregon. Obviously they put up a lot of points on a Penn State defense that I thought was pretty good. And while Penn State, made it interesting, every time you kind of looked at the game, it's like, okay, oh, Penn State's coming back, but Oregon puts up another touchdown to just keep them out of reach, right? So um, I think it was a phenomenal offensive performance from Oregon there, and I think they're clearly the number one team in the country. Dan Lanning is doing a phenomenal job with that program. And as far as Penn State goes, I think you definitely saw some good things, especially from the offense. Oregon's been playing some good defense here as of late, and the fact that you put up that many points against them, it's good news heading into the playoffs. You have the ability to drop that many points on a elite defense. So I think you come away feeling good about both teams. Obviously, better about Oregon. While the score seemed like it was a super close game, I actually kind of lean towards Oregon handling that game a little bit better because, like I said, they just kept Penn State out of reach the whole game. So, and that pick was insane at the end. That's a hard play for a corner to make, man. A go ball that you were able to get the lead on the receiver. You get in front of them and you turn your head around and snag it. That was impressive. So, um, yeah, no, that was an impressive way to end the game. I've come away feeling good about both teams, but especially better about Oregon.
Yeah, and I think my takeaway is that Oregon, highest high caliber offense, man, and it will work against the best teams in the country.
Yep.
They put up 45 against Penn State. They put up 32 against Ohio State earlier this year, and I think their offense has gotten better since that performance against Ohio State. The problem is both times they played good teams, their defense has showed some issues, so they haven't looked necessarily dominant. 31 against is what they gave up to Ohio State. They gave up 37 to Penn State. The biggest thing I'm seeing is that there is a issue with their run defense. They really only rotate in about 3 defensive tackles. Sometimes they'll get a fourth in there, but in the biggest games when they really need their best players out there, we've seen primarily 3 defensive tackles. That's really tough on defensive tackles because the guys that they got in there, I mean, they're big dudes. They can control the line of scrimmage. They're 300, 320 pounds. They're massive guys, but that also means that it exerts a lot of effort for them to fire off the ball every play, or if teams are running outside zone plays and they got to get out to the perimeter like that. That's a lot of running for a really big guy, and it kind of bared out that way with Penn State having 8.3 yards per carry that game, which is that's pretty crazy. Which is, like I said, why I kind of had an issue with them taking a shot and end up throwing that pick. You're averaging 8.3 yards per carry. I get that you're limited in time, but first down, stop the clock, and it's 2nd and 1, and they had enough time definitely to get down there. So, I think maybe Penn State probably should have leaned on the run game a little bit more than they did. If you're averaging 8.3 yards per carry and the strength of your offense is running the ball, and Katron Allen only gets 14 carries, I mean, I get you're splitting his carries with Nick Singleton too, but I would have ran the ball a little bit more. They were down though. They ended up going down big, so that was kind of a struggle. It put them in a bad spot. But really, turnovers ended up winning this game for Oregon. Oregon doesn't turn the ball over, and Penn State turns the ball over twice. One of them directly led to an Oregon touchdown by Oregon getting an interception and getting tackled at one, just able to pound it in. And Penn State only had to punt twice that game. Oregon punted 4 times. Really just a very well, a good game to watch. Really good game to watch. Both offenses, like we said, really lighten it up.
Yeah.
So,
as far as your point on the defense goes for Oregon, you're right. They've let up 37 to Penn State. They've let up 31 to Ohio State, and they let up 34 to Boise State. Those are the top 3 teams that they've played who are all in the playoffs, right? So you got concerns, but all you need that defense to do is, like they did against Penn State, generate 1 or 2 turnovers, because the offense is going to put up a bunch of points. So that's all you really need. You just need an opportunistic defense in order for Oregon to be able to handle these games. So while it's concerning that they're letting up that many points to, playoff teams, I'm not super concerned that it's like, oh, I think they're going to lose now because of this defense letting up points. As long as it's opportunistic, they're able to generate 1 or 2 turnovers a game, they're going to be just fine.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, big performances in this game, obviously. Dylan Gabriel, 22 for 32, 283, 4 touchdowns. Jordan James for Oregon had 20 carries, 87 yards, 2 tutties. Tez Johnson, 11 of those receptions. So he caught half of the balls that Dylan Gabriel completed for 181, which is a Big Ten championship game record and 1 touchdown. That guy is a game breaker, man. If you get him the ball in open field, he's going to absolutely torch you. Drew Aller for Penn State, 20 for 39, 226, 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. And then, like I said, Katron Allen had 14 carries for 124 and a touchdown. So, exactly what you'd expect out of a game with a lot of offense is just offensive dudes putting up absolutely massive numbers.
Oregon gets the Big Ten championship, man. Shout out to Pac-12 here. RIP the top Pac-12. Oregon going to the Big Ten, winning it the first year that they're there. Arizona State going to the Big 12, winning it the first year that they're in it. You had, you just hate to see now all the conferences are so lopsided and awkward. It's a little disappointing. We could have had a pretty awesome conference still with the Pac-12, but that's a different side note there. But yeah, Pac-12 still looking good here.
Yeah, it is kind of a sad note, especially when you look at last year, man. There's some really quality teams in the Pac-12 last year, like Oregon was good, Arizona, Washington, obviously.
Washington went to the championship.
Yeah. I mean, USC was top 10 for the first 6 or 7 weeks of that season. They ended up falling off at the end, but and Utah was good last year. There was so much good going up, and you see Colorado trending up. Man, there was a lot of good stuff in the Pac-12. It kind of sucks that it got broken apart, but now we get to see Oregon and Ohio State every year, which I'm not going to argue with that. That's pretty awesome. That being said, let's get into the actual playoff bracket instead of lamenting the dead Pac-12. We got Oregon getting the 1 seed, Georgia 2 seed, Boise State with 3 seed, and Arizona State with 4 seed, and obviously all those teams are going to get first round byes. So then you look at the other games. Number 12 Clemson will be going to number 5 Texas. Number 11 SMU is going to number 6 Penn State. Number 10 Indiana will be going to go play at Notre Dame, and then number 9 Tennessee at Ohio State. What are your takeaways from just your initial reactions to this bracket?
Overall, I think I agree with how the committee ranked it. As far as the rankings go, we'll get into some of the other things here as far as the format, the committee, and whatnot. But the only one I have an issue with is SMU being ahead of Clemson. Why? We literally just watched that game, and you have SMU 1 spot ahead of Clemson. That makes 0 sense. But we're splitting it. I mean, they're 1 apart. They're at the back end of the playoffs. It's not too big of a deal. So that was the only one I took issue with as far as the committee rankings go. Other than that, I think I agree with pretty much all the rankings.
Yeah, I think given the format, the committee was not in charge of the format. I think it's important to remember that. They rank the teams and then they slot them in according to the format that they're given. The problem is I think the format is flawed for a multitude of reasons. So my first reason on this is I think seeding needs to be fixed. So the problem here for me is conference championship teams, they should not get an automatic bye. They should get an automatic bid. I'm with that. I'm cool with that. It makes sense. An automatic bye is something that I am not a proponent of. Why? Well, it actually punishes teams at the top, like Oregon, because when you take these teams that like Arizona State, 11th ranked team in the country, gets the number 4 seed. Well, that means every single team between 4 and 11 gets slotted back one. You do the same thing with Boise State. You move them from 9 to 3. Every team gets slotted down one, and all of a sudden you've got a team like Texas, who's a number 4 team or number 3 team in the country. They're the 5th seed. Ohio State, who's number 6 in the country, they're the 8th seed, and it's really tough on top teams, specifically Oregon in this bracket. And we'll get into kind of how Oregon got screwed more and more as we talk about it, because I think they really did. But how do you feel about that maybe they should just get an automatic bid and not a bye?
I agree with it. It doesn't make too much sense to me. You had Arizona State as the number 16 team in the country, or 16 or 17, one of two, heading in the Big 12 championship. They win the Big 12, which they absolutely deserve that, right? To get an automatic bid in the playoffs. You want a Power 4 conference. But you move from 16 to 4 off of a win against Iowa State, who was, I think, number 17, that's a crazy jump for a team that I don't think is deserving of the 4 seed. You had 2 losses in the Big 12, which is a weak conference. Your resume is, hey, we beat a couple of the Big 12 teams that are also like 10-2, right? Which is fine. It's absolutely deserving of making the playoffs. You won your conference. You deserve a bid into the playoffs. But getting a bye, that's crazy to me. I don't think it's deserved, and so yeah, it leads to this lopsidedness of basically every team but Oregon has a phenomenal path to make it to the championship, which is Oregon should be getting the path of least resistance. They're the number 1 team. They've earned that right. So it doesn't make too much sense to me.
Yeah, so if you look at it if you were to reseed these teams based on just giving an automatic bid instead of that automatic bye, you'd have Oregon 1, Georgia 2, Texas would get the 3 seed in a bye, Penn State would get the 4 seed in a bye, and then you'd have Clemson at number 5, Notre Dame, ASU at number 6, Ohio State, SMU at number 7, Tennessee, and number 9, Boise State at Indiana. And you look at that and it's like, okay, Oregon gets the winner of Boise State, Indiana. That makes a little bit more sense than the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee. Like, really? And then you look at it and it's like, okay, now Tennessee and Indiana both get home games, which, you can have a gripe with Indiana and Boise State. Maybe Boise State winning that conference championship game should get that home game, whatever. But Tennessee deserves a home game more than ASU deserves a bye. Like, I don't get it. I have some frustrations with the way it ends up working out. And I think you look at it and you do look at automatic bid as opposed to automatic bye. I think that format looks a lot better in terms of, where teams are seated and what you kind of expect out of a traditional bracket.
Yeah, I agree. That playoff sounds a lot better. It sounds like a realistic playoff bracket right there. Based off of what we've seen for the season, this is what you'd expect to see. But no, now we have this weird, oh, you get an automatic bye if you do this, and now we got this strange looking bracket that's lopsided to not favor the best teams in the bracket. So yeah, no, I overall I agree. It just needs to be automatic bids if you win your conference championship.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of brings me to my second point, which is conference championship games create an issue. And so, paths to conference championship games are very different for different teams. So, example, for like SMU, they had a really easy conference schedule. They only played 2 opponents with winning records in the ACC, which means 6 of the teams they played were 500 or worse in the ACC. Well, if you're a quality team, you probably should go 7-1. You split the game. You go, or well, no, they went undefeated, but if you're a quality team, you should win all those games. Now, granted, they did. Like, hats off to them. They took care of business against a weak schedule, but it's pretty easy for them to get there compared to other teams. So one of the things to me, like if you compare SEC schedules, Texas, the only ranked team they ended up playing is Georgia. They did play at Texas A&M. They ended up not being ranked by the end of the season. Georgia's schedule, however, they have to play Ole Miss, Tennessee, Alabama, and Texas. So you're telling me Georgia and Texas are both playing in the SEC title game, and Georgia, they have one more loss and end up getting ranked behind Texas before going into that game. But Texas only has to play Georgia. That's their only ranked game the entire season. And by the way, they only played like 4 games on the road the entire season, 3 or 4 games on the road the entire season. So I have issues with the paths for different teams. I mean, do you see kind of a similar thing?
There's too many teams to a conference. And as of right now, there's almost no way to fix it because you can't play every single team in an 18-team conference or whatever we're at now, right? You can't expect these college programs to play 20 games in a season. That's just not realistic. And so, while it's fun to see these kind of super conferences of all these top teams, you still got a bunch of mediocre and bad teams at these conferences that just, if you draw lucky, as far as your schedule for the season, you got a pretty damn easy path to the playoffs. Whereas you draw terribly, you still might be one of the best teams in your conference, but you're not going to make the playoffs because, you just had a tough schedule. So the issue is just how many teams there are to a conference and how uneven it is across college football. You got, 18 in the Big Ten?
Yep,
And
18 in the Big Ten.
16 in the SEC.
Yep, and ACC and Big 12, I believe. I think all of them have 16.
But when it came to the ACC and Big 12, the lower end of the Pac-12 are what joined those conferences, right? So those conferences didn't get any stronger. The Big Ten and the SEC are the ones that got the good teams from the Pac-12. So now you just have the super lopsided Big Ten and SEC are the top conferences. There's no question about it. And then you just kind of got these middling ACC and Big 12 conferences, and we're supposed to view them equally, right? Like, we're supposed to view a Power 4 conference as an even conference overall, like in the scope of, a decade or something like that. You should see some evenness, but we don't. And so I'm not quite sure how it gets fixed. The Pac-12 dissolving really did kind of mess up how we view these conferences and how we schedule these games, because it used to be every Power 5 conference had about 12 teams, and you played 75% of them. And now you're playing 50% of your conference, and only 2 of the conferences are any good.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things you brought up that I want to address there. So first, the 8-game conference schedule in the SEC and ACC are no longer acceptable. You're only going to play, in the SEC, you're playing half your teams, ACC, you're playing half your teams. And even in the Big Ten, you're playing 9 conference games, but there's 18 teams. So you can get drastic variance in how many of the teams you're playing. I think to fix that, what you could do is you could implement more of a 10-game conference schedule. So we just see more interconference play. It gives us, more data points to see who really should be the conference championship game. And then you get more head-to-head tiebreakers as opposed to the weird tiebreakers that teams don't control. Like, who had a stronger conference schedule? Like, who had a higher opponent win percentage? Well, the teams don't control that. Like, that's not really fair to me. Like, you can only play who's on your schedule, and they didn't make the schedule. So add more conference games. I think also there needs to be, like, maybe a universal scheduling committee that comes together and makes these schedules for these Power 4 teams, or even inside of just the conference themselves scheduling things. Use the conference standings from last year and try and make those schedules as equal as possible. I feel like it really wouldn't be that hard. You look at their win percentage in conference games from the season before and say, okay, Texas, they're gonna play a schedule where teams last year went a combined 24 and 23 in conference play. Like that's a small number, but you know what I mean. Like, everyone plays a roughly the same caliber schedule. I don't think that would be that hard to implement. And then you avoid these things where Georgia has to play 4 of the top 12 teams in the country and Texas has to play one ranked team the entire season. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. And when you value these conference championship games like we do and say, here's an automatic bye, especially if you keep that automatic bye, it's like, man, you're looking at a team that could be really good, like you said, and just not making the playoff, whereas a team who's not nearly as good in the same conference could actually lose to that team, could lose to the better team, still go to the conference championship game, get the freaking 3 seed, and the other team's on the outside looking in. So it just brings up a lot of issues, I think. And, I think it also brings up a conference championship game conundrum. So you look at it and you don't want to punish teams for losing these conference championship games, right? And that makes sense. I get it. I'm on board. That's why I'm with what the committee gave us in terms of SMU over Alabama. Because if they put Alabama in, it's like, okay, I'm never going to go play a conference championship game in my life unless it has a chance to get me into the game. So if I'm SMU, I get left out, and next season I'm 11-1, and if I lose, I might get bumped out again. I'm gonna say no thanks. I'm good. I'm not gonna go play. Like I declined my invite to the ACC title game. Someone else can go play for me. I'm good. I'm in the playoff already. I don't need that. And so as a fan, I don't want to see that. And the problem is it gives us data points that we're not allowed to use, even though we kind of do have a better idea of who these teams are. So, I mean, I'll kind of kick this to you, but if you're picking SMU Alabama on a neutral site game, who are you taking in that game?
I'm picking Alabama in a neutral site game. If we're going to assume that if we want to value conferences, which I think we do, then I still think you have to have the conference championship. And I get that it's unfair in a sense that, it's a data point that you can't, I disagree that it's a data point that you can't use. It's just a data point that for one of the two teams can only better that team's stock. And that I think that's okay. I think there needs to be value to winning your conference. So as far as the point of, I think conference championships are fine as long as we view them as it's an automatic bye rather than, an automatic bid rather than a bye. And I think that completely clears up that problem. I still want to see a conference championship game. I want to know who comes out of the Power Four conferences. I still think that holds value. So I think I might push back just a little bit on it's just a data point that can only further the stock of one team.
Yeah, I get that because you want to say, hey, these teams both earned their right to try and boost their resumes, and you don't want to punish these teams just based on the game and the fact that these other teams aren't playing. But to me, then I look at the way that things end up getting seeded. Well, why is Penn State ahead of Ohio State? I don't get it. Ohio State has a much better resume, and you look at that Oregon data point, and it's like, okay, well, if Penn State beats Oregon, well, then, you kind of have that three-way, 1-1 between Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon. Well, you don't. Penn State lost, and they lost to Ohio State. And they're 0-2 in that scenario against ranked teams. Ohio State is 2-1 against top 10 teams. So why is Ohio State ranked behind Penn State? Oh, because Penn State played in a conference championship game that they didn't win? Okay. Texas is 0-2 against ranked teams. Like I said, Ohio State 2-1 against top 10 teams. Why is Texas ranked ahead of Ohio State? Oh, it's because they played in a conference championship game that they didn't win, and that they got there based on only playing one ranked team at home the entire season that they lost. I struggle with looking at these games and seeing what they're actually showing us that they are as teams. And I get that you can't have it both ways, right? You can't value the conference championship game and then use it to negatively impact teams. And so that's why I'm saying it's kind of a conundrum where you're stuck. It's like, I know better than what I'm actually putting out into this ranking, but I'm not allowed to do it differently because we need these conference championship games to matter. And I think that ends up, like I said, hurting teams like Oregon, where Ohio State is still back at number 8. Even though if I was going to look at their resumes and compare them as 2-loss teams, Ohio State has a better resume than both those teams and should probably be up near that 6 seed, maybe even the 5 seed ahead of Notre Dame, because Notre Dame only has the ranked win against Army. So, I struggle with being able to look at data and then not really getting to use it.
I think that goes to show just how important the rankings leading up to the CFP, how important those are. Like, a lot of the arguments for, oh, don't worry about the rankings week by week because it'll all be right in the end, I think is BS. Because for the exact point you said, why is Penn State ahead of Ohio State when Ohio State beat Penn State, right? And they have another win against the top 10 team in Indiana. They have the better resume, right? And I think to me that just goes to show, well, okay, why was Penn State ever ahead ranking wise, ahead of Ohio State to begin with, right? So the committee already set this up, right? They said we view Penn State as better than Ohio State leading into the conference championships, and we're not going to punish them, right? That's where the issue comes in. You have to rank these teams correctly before you get into the conference championships. So that just goes into the committee. Why it always circles back to the committee not being good at ranking teams leading up to the conference championships and making a finalized bracket. So I get your point, man. As far as it is a conundrum for sure. I don't mind the conundrum in a sense that I think the conference championship should only be able to further your stock. You shouldn't be punished for it. But I think the committee needs to do a much better job leading into the final week to make sure that the rankings actually make sense and that it's fair. Ohio State should be ahead of Penn State, in my opinion.
Yeah. It is an issue with ranking before those things and then kind of putting that artificial floor below those teams. Like, okay, well now you can't drop below here, even though we know that maybe you should be lower than that. I had one idea I wanted to bounce off you real quick. I don't know if you're familiar with the conference challenges in college basketball, but what they do is they take the standings from the previous year and they just it'll be ACC versus SEC. And the best SEC team and the best ACC team from last year play each other. The second best team from each conference play each other. Third best team. So I'm curious if you like that idea or you think maybe that punishes teams for playing well the previous season, considering they have tougher games. So I think that would give us more insight into okay, how good is this conference really? Because we saw them go head to head and line it up and play their best teams against each other earlier in the season. And then, you get into a tiebreaker where it's oh, SMU or Alabama, actually they played each other because they were, respectively, the third best teams in their conferences last year. And then, you could kind of eliminate some of those FCS program games. And it gives you more quality games in the season for college football. So I'm curious what you think about that idea.
Good idea as far as getting, I like that more as far as non-conference schedules go than Georgia scheduling with Mercer or something like that, schools you've never heard of, right? More relevant football is always a good thing. I don't think these big schools should just have a easy out, every single non-conference game. So the only issue I might have with it is we can only play about 11, 12 games in a season before we got to get into the playoffs and get going, right? So in some ways, I almost just wonder if you just remove non-conference completely and you actually play 75% of the teams within your conference. Because now that we're at 18-team conferences, playing only half just really doesn't paint a picture as to how good you are within your conference. And so maybe if it was one, okay, 4 teams in the Big Ten are going to play 4 teams in the Big 12 or something like that, right? And you kind of split it up so that a quarter of your teams play one of the other 3 conferences, right?
Yeah.
I think that would be a good idea. So you're only talking about maybe 1, maybe 2 non-conference games. And I like that idea as far as, okay, let's actually get some relevant matchups here to actually determine what conferences are better. So I like the idea, just as long as it's not like, you know, 4 non-conference games
No.
still, while we're still only getting 8 conference games, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's the thing in college basketball is it's not like you don't play a bunch of those games. You just play whoever was equally ranked in their respective conference the year prior, and you just play that one game, and it kind of gives you a little bit of perspective, and it just leads to some high leverage matchups. Now, granted, you can take a lot more losses in college basketball than you can in college football, so maybe you're setting teams up for failure there and punishing them for doing well. But I think just you know getting more data points and having more standardized scheduling in college football is something that's becoming more and more important as we try and compare all these teams that are playing vastly different schedules, and you want to compare them. Well, we got to start, maybe giving some more data points that you can accurately compare them. I got one more gripe with this format, and that is there are way too many neutral site games. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, home games are way more fun, man. They really are. And from a fan perspective, you're asking fans to travel to potentially 3 different neutral site games. I mean, if you're one of the teams that it doesn't have a home game the first week, you're asking them to go all the way, for like pick a team, but they got to fly all the way across the country possibly to go watch an away game, and then they have 3 different neutral site games. That's I don't like it. I don't like that the top 4 teams in the country are never going to get a home game under this format. So Oregon, number 1 team in the country, guess what? You don't get to host any games. You get to go neutral site game. Arizona State, as much as I don't like that 4 seed, they're the 4 seed, and they should be treated as such if that's going to be your format. Congratulations, Arizona State. You get to go play the winner of Texas or Clemson in Atlanta. That's a lot closer to both Clemson and Texas than it is to Arizona State. And you're asking Arizona State fans to fly all the way out there. If they win that game, they're going to play another neutral site game, probably on the East Coast because most of them are. They got to fly all the way out there again. And it's just, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't promote, the fandom in college football, especially when you look at like who are your biggest college football fans, and we're talking about alumni who might still live close to the college and who want to go back to the stadium and kind of be able to be there because they went there, they went to that school. So I have issues with all the neutral site games and all that type of stuff. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think the issue is just the bowl games are still trying to hold their tradition, right? So like the Rose Bowl has been around for like 120 years or something like that. Like it's been around for forever, and I think they're still trying to hold on to the fact that they, are a relevant college tradition. And not to say that they're not, I mean, growing up, we always watched the Rose Bowl, all the bowl games, right? It was fun. But that's when we were at a bowl game format where the end of your season, your reward was going to get to play a fun bowl game at a, cool location while just 2 teams duked it out for the championship, right? That's not a format anymore. We're doing playoffs now, where playoffs should be played, you know, on the road or at home. Like there shouldn't be these neutral locations for the quarterfinals of the playoffs, right? That to me is ridiculous. And it's as far as like tradition goes, obviously it's fun to have college traditions, but sometimes they just got to go away. And my hope is that they kind of do. It's cool to maybe just bring the Rose Bowl to, Penn State or whatever this weekend, like or whenever they play that game. Bring it to whatever home team you want to have the Rose Bowl at, right? That's still fun. You can still have that tradition. We just need to reformat it so that we're not making these teams travel for no reason. Just let's have some fun, electric home games with great atmospheres, with fans that are actually in the location and can make it to games. So yeah, I agree with you. I let's have some home and road games in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you really care about those traditions, I mean, this is kind of building off the idea I was already talking about with the conference challenges. So, like, hey, okay, next year you want to keep the Rose Bowl around? All right, week 2 of the season, let's have the best team from the Big Ten last year and the best team from I don't know who. It's not the Pac-12 anymore, but have the best team from that conference and the best team from the Big Ten go play week 2 in a non-conference game, and since they both were the number one, they were both the best teams in their respective conferences last year, and you're doing this conference challenge thing, that's the Rose Bowl. Have them go play in the Rose Bowl then, week 2. I get it wouldn't be the same. If you really want to keep the tradition of the Rose Bowl around, I mean, that's maybe something you could do, because I don't think implementing it into the playoff is any longer productive. But you also don't want to ruin it by saying, okay, the number 17 team and the number 22 team are going to go play in the Rose Bowl. Like that's not the Rose Bowl, and when we all know it. So, that it keeps high profile games in the Rose Bowl if you did it that way. But, that's just rattling off ideas. The end of the day, the tradition of bowl games and the new college football playoff format, they just don't mix. And they were never going to.
Yeah, I think the overall takeaway of just this whole conversation, the committee, the rankings, conference championship, all that stuff, it just goes to show like we're definitely in a transition period in college football as far as now we have a 12-team playoff. There's a massive conference realignment, NIL. A lot of college football is changing pretty rapidly, and so I think it's going to take a little while before we see some standardization, I guess, like things or organization, like just things that make sense for the NCAA. I mean, it worked for about a decade there with the 4-team playoff format. We still had even conferences, but we all had gripes. We're like, hey, why are there only 4 teams that get into the playoff? Let's expand this thing, right? So
yeah,
we're seeing a lot of changes, and hopefully the NCAA is able to figure it out that it's pretty chaotic right now, and they need to bring some organization. So we'll see.
Yeah, and to kind of wrap up this whole idea, yeah, we're in a transition, and yeah, there's going to be issues for sure. Overall, I'm thrilled. Like, at the end of the day, as much as I'm complaining here and as much as I've got issues with stuff, I am absolutely thrilled as just a college football fan. I mean, you're getting into a lot of great games that really mean something. We watched a bunch of games coming down the stretch. Like, you look at conference championship weekend, no one would have cared about Arizona State, Iowa State, in the 4-team format. And now we get to see more higher leverage games, and we did add some home games, which I'm excited about. Like, even if Texas is a 8, 9, 10-point favorite, I haven't looked at the line yet, but even if they are, you still get to watch Clemson take a shot at it. Maybe you get to see a little bit of a Cinderella run where a team can win a couple games in a row, or maybe SMU goes and wins a couple of games or something like that. So overall, it is a positive thing. I'm very excited as a fan of college football to really get into this playoffs. And, that's kind of the thing. As much as I'm complaining, like I said, very excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. This is a great format. I'm excited to dive into, how the playoffs are going to turn out, trying to make some predictions. But yeah, overall, good conference championship weekend. We officially got our bracket.
Yeah, we do. It's awesome. We will get into those games next week. That's what we'll bring to you guys next week for our college football podcast. Well, I wanted to leave you guys with a couple of little betting lines because we do have bowl games starting up before we get to the playoff. So a couple of my favorite lines are going to be Memphis -2.5 versus West Virginia. Memphis just beat Tulane by 10 to win the AAC. They looked really good coming down the stretch, 10-2 team. West Virginia, they ended up playing all right to close the season, but they got blown out by 35 by Texas Tech. Their head coach gets fired. So you wonder, how much this means to each team. Memphis, a ranked team. West Virginia is not. They finished the season 6-6. I think 2.5 is a very small margin, when you're looking at those things. So I like Memphis to cover the 2.5 there.
Yeah, another one I kind of like is Florida -12 against Tulane. I've kind of had this take consistently throughout the season. If DJ Legway plays, I like Florida to win. And so yeah, as long as he's playing in this game, Tulane's a solid team. They had a great season, but playing an SEC team is a big difference, and so I like Florida to cover -12.
Yeah, another one that I like is going to be UNLV money line versus Cal. That's at +145. I'm actually pretty surprised that Cal is favored in this one. But UNLV, I get they lost to Boise, and maybe they hang their head like, oh man, we were that close to playing in the playoffs, not playing this stupid bowl game. I don't think so. I don't think that's how they'll take it. They had a really good season, and I think they should be prideful in that. And I think they're going to want to go finish the season the right way. And we've seen better things from UNLV this season than we have from Cal. I get the Cal's playing in that Power 4 conference, but they're a really middle of the road ACC team. So give me UNLV to go take care of business and not win, especially a plus money.
Yeah, that's about it as far as what I'm seeing. As far as
Yeah,
bets go.
there's not that many. I think it's just like 5 or 6 games before the college football playoff really gets into it. And like I said, we'll bring you guys some more bets for other bowl games and our massive previews. We're really going to dive into each one of these games, more than we have previously this season and really get you guys our best predictions that we can bring to you. Really excited about it. Max, anything else you want to talk about from college football?
No, I don't think so, man. Appreciate everyone listening. It was a good time talking about some playoff football here.
Yeah, we made it, guys. We made it. It is time for the first 12 team college football playoff. I'm psyched. I'm absolutely pumped. Get to go home for Christmas break, watch some freaking football, man. It's going to be awesome. NFL coming down the stretch here, too. It's all good things. Yeah, we appreciate you guys, paying attention, sticking with us until the end of the season, and we got more good things to come. So, appreciate y'all listening and go make some money this weekend.